What specifically is it about words and about language that you love so deeply, that you care so much about?
It's like the possibilities of words. It's endless. You know, words can make you say horrible things, they can destroy you, they can also love you, but they are amazing. I have two sons, and the youngest was diagnosed with schizophrenia. You don't even know that he's sick. His body is there, but there's somebody in there that is not your son.
I have a question for you, but if you feel that that question goes too far, or if you don't want to answer it for any reason whatsoever, please let me know.
If you have something that happens that is tearing you apart, and you can just turn to God and say, "Oh man, that hurts. Why did you do that?" I don't judge it. I think that people that have faith are very lucky. Maybe life is easier when you believe.
What you and I are having right now is not a conversation about poetry. It's a conversation about the human experience, your human experience. That is a beautiful story. That is a story very much worth telling. And I think you've really told that story very beautifully today. All right. Well, what is poetry?
It's a big word. It's a big word. Um, what is poetry? Ay, ay, ay. I think that type of question could be answered in a classroom at a university with a professor telling you all about what is poetry. And I've been there and I've done that, and all the rules of versification and all that kind of. But I think there's a poetry that is very personal. Some poets need to write their own thing, not just poets, I think artists and in general. And so the other day, I was listening to a podcast with um, Ian McGilchrist. I don't know if you know Ian McGilchrist.
From name.
And he was speaking with another a man from a group called Illumen. They are spiritual men. Okay, so what he said to Ian, he said, spirituality is not a noun, it is a verb. And that really, really struck for me because I think poetry is not a noun, it is a verb. That's the way I lived it. I think we can know poetry by all the great poets, by um, memorizing poems by heart, by, I don't know, that way. But there's also a way of knowing or poetry as a verb. What I mean is by action. It seems that poetry, for some people like me, is to be discovered. It is to be fought with. It is to be lived out. It is like I remember as a young woman, because I've always been drawn to words. I would love words. I'd love play on words. I would, as a child, just change certain words in a song because I loved the play of it. Um, and because I was born in a very small place, um, I was seen as very, very, I don't know, very what they called intelligent at the time, in a small school. And I was also seen as a poet in a small family. But when you come out of your family or your little, um, you're not that good and you're not that bright and you're not there's a lot more. So you have to come to terms with who you are and what you are. And you have this very, very strong urge. I think it's a need to write poetry. You're drawn to the words. The words talk to you. You see them flying all around you. You love them. But then when you write, you don't have any, or if you do have feedback, it's like, well, it's not very good, or that's not the way to do it, or you have to submit to rules and you have to do it in a certain way. And for me, well, I have an awful lot of what they call disagreeableness. I cannot obey. It is so hard. I tried. I tried. I tried. I tried. In I got married a few times and been in relationships, and but I just can't stand. It seems to me I have to be alone. I have to do my own thing, and I have to. So that's how I that's how I lived out poetry. I had to fight with it. I had to say, I remember I was brought up Catholic, and um, there was like a lot of believing in God or whatever. But I think instinctively we talk to some kind of a God. And I remember telling God, okay, so you give me this gift and I'm no good. So what? You know? And saying that it was a ripoff or I'm sorry. A lot of this is very funny now because I'm 76, but at the time it was really painful. So here I am. I'm supposed to be a poet and I love words and oh but 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 I'm no good. But the thing is that um I think that disagreeableness or stubbornness or whatever was a gift because I never stopped. I never stopped. And through my life, what I've discovered with writing poetry, I've discovered, I think, what everybody wants to discover. It's at the end of your life, you're very happy. You're very happy you didn't give up. And you're finally at a place where what you do and what you write, you find it absolutely cool. And you kind of love your own work. It doesn't matter what others think or what. And and that was a long process. It took many years of you know many years of total depression and giving up and all kinds of. So what is poetry? I think poetry is like music. Like I've known many artists who paint, and you're never uh, out there like as a genius or whatever, but somehow it's your call, it's your way, it's what you do to discover your own. Well, like Ian McGilchrist said, in that podcast, you kind of discover your own spirituality. You discover it through your own way.
I have I have a background in writing as well, so I'm very curious where you differentiate. Yeah, let's call it regular writing and poetry. So specifically for me, I've written professionally as a journalist, but also for fun, working on short stories, for example.
Hmm.
But I've never, for as far as I know at least, engaged in writing poetry. So for me and anybody out there who doesn't know what the difference is between, let's call it regular writing or creative writing, and poetry, where's the difference?
Um, I can just answer for myself, okay? Because I can't say for all the poets, because I think each and every poet has a way of approaching poetry. Um, for me, I guess the first thing as a very young child was it was my whole identity. It was my gift. It was what I could do. I could make my father laugh because I had written something, interesting. And I remember my very first poem. I was in grade 4. The nuns absolutely loved it. And so it was who I was, you see,
Mhm.
and although life has brought me into so many whew, very, very, very dark places, that stayed with me. I think poetry can be, because I've met many people who write poetry for entertainment. It's very, it's like music and it's written very beautifully. And I love it that way too. When I read the poets, whoa, I love it. But for me, it was almost like a spiritual quest, you know? And the way I wrote poetry was by seeking, asking questions, trying to find myself. Because I had been lost. I had been totally lost as a poet. I had given up. I had given up completely. And I don't know if you went through that because I'm quite older than you are. I'm 76. But when you go through what we call postmodernism and reading Foucault and Derrida and Deleuze, Guattari, I don't know, there were quite a few, especially for me, Derrida and the deconstruction and how you can actually take a word and break it into pieces. It doesn't mean anything, and the way we construct our lives and our beliefs with through narratives, and these guys, these philosophers, are not idiots. Uh, there's a whole lot of truth to what they say, but the danger of taking that too far is that you destroy your culture. You know what I mean? You destroy all the values that you've been. I mean, Western civilization, and it's very dangerous as the way I lived it anyway. Um, and I think for me, there was a need, like like I said, maybe with people like Ian McGilchrist. I think Jordan Peterson also works a lot along that way, that line, to turn back to our values and um, to not lose sight of what of all the good, all the that we
Mhm.
had, and
Mhm.
not destroy everything and to replace it by what? Uh, and so many young people today are suffering from, I don't know, for lots of things, not knowing who they are, and a lot of mental illness everywhere. And so I don't know. I'm in this world like everybody else, and I'm I can't live in a world where everything is constructed in a way you just evaluate everything with power, like that it's all the power struggle. So all these narratives, all these things, it was just for white people to be powerful and to, um, I'm not going to go into that because it is so complex, and I don't want, it's not black and white, and there's,
Mhm.
but I think there has to be something good that comes out of this, um, and maybe people are trying to find something, and maybe that's what I'm doing too, in my own way, in these poems that I write today, because my poetry has changed so much over the years, from very childhood things to then falling in love, and then you write all about your heartbreaks. And then I met um, a poet in my life also, and that man was very, very influential into my own poetry. Um, of course, it was a like, of course, what I did, he considered trash, and it's not good, So, but what he did at that time, I considered like, wow, this is really good, But then he would. This is a weird couple. We were a weird couple, and but he would consider his own poems trash also, and actually he'd throw them in the garbage. So, so this was a weird couple, really. But what happened between me and that man is that um, I thought, we should publish, we should make a book. It was for all kinds of reasons, but mostly I think it was I was trying to survive because we were very poor and we had two little boys. Okay, so we had these. I myself put together a little book where my little boy had drawn a bird, and then I dedicated the book to my other son, the youngest. So a lot of the poems in there were mine, but quite a few were his. So I published that under my name. So it had a good reception, but I had to play the role of the poet at that time, where I had written the whole book, but some of the poems were not mine. So I thought to myself, well, I have to do something about this. I have to clear this up. Okay. So I published another one where there were almost all of it were my poems, but there were still a few, but not as much as the other ones. So I thought, I could slowly. It's incredible, but then this second book won a prize. So here I am, having to go to Paris, to receive a prize for poetry, and some of the poems were not mine. It's like I felt like such a horrible person. And so what I did is I went to the publisher and I met the guy and I told him, I said, this, I can't do this. These, some of these are just not mine. I don't want to do this. He said, it's okay. You're not the first one. Can you imagine? Somebody would I think so anyway, he said, just we can't turn back. Just do it. But I did tell him, that this was what happened. So he knew. Okay. So I thought, well, okay, whew, at least he knows. But it didn't fix it. It didn't fix it. That haunted me. It haunted me for years. And every year, there was this festival, and they had all the poets that had won that prize, and there was my name. And, it's like, oh man, I just didn't want to have anything to do with that. But then I struggled to write my own, to write. That's something that guy from the publishing company, that's something that he told me that was very, very useful for me. He said, you know what you can do about this? Keep writing. Okay. And he was right,
Mhm.
because that was the only way that I could, you know, be a poet, not a fake one, if I wanted to fix this. So quite the episode, isn't
Right.
it?
Yeah, for sure. I think so. There's I think a very important point that you touched. You were talking a little bit earlier about the identity crisis that's right now going on in the world, and you mentioned as one of your examples the mental issues that, because of that, people nowadays have and struggle with.
Yeah.
You also mentioned that poetry for you is like a religious quest. I would like to bring these two together because it seems to me, and that's I can't prove that in data. It's just a gut feeling that I have. But it seems to me that the world in general, or at least the Western world, is trying to reconnect more with traditional values.
Mhm.
So, to some degree, with their spirituality. And you mentioned poetry as a spiritual quest. Do you think that the introduction? So, let me ask it in an open-ended way. How do you think the exploration or the practice of poetry can help people reconnect with purpose and with meaning and help with that identity crisis that you mentioned?
I think first of all, you have to find your own if you want to help others. And that's a long, long process, what it can be. Okay. You have to find your own identity as a poet. You have to find your own voice. That's what that's what we talk about. You have your own voice, but you have to find it. It has to be strong and yours and clear. And whether people like it or not, or whether you're worth publishing or not, it doesn't matter. When it's yours, you feel it. Okay. And I think that when that happens, when you own your voice, okay, I think that's when you can help. And that's when maybe your poetry, your little uh, text, whatever. I know my last book, I didn't even put poetry on the first page because a lot of it is reflections.
Mhm.
It's um, they are poetry for me, but they may not be for other people because for me, trying to absolutely make a poem didn't make sense anymore. I just had to say things with harsh words, to give messages, to maybe what I had understood, what I could give at 76, how my own journey, or the fact that it's not my own at all. It's our journey, the West. How we're losing our values, losing our um, identity, losing who we are. Um, how we can recapture all that. Not all of it, but some. And so I don't know. Um, it's hard to talk about all these things because all that it's in the poems. It's in the poems themselves. You see, the messages, the words, the hope, the love, the um, you just can't give up. But you just take those words and you just I don't know. When you find your voice, the words find you. They really do, and they come easily.
How does one find their own voice? So let's, for anybody who is watching and listening right now, who is facing the challenge of finding their own voice or putting forward that which is their own, and instead maybe, for example, tempted to copy others in order to
Hmm.
be allowed into a community or a group or something like that, right?
Yeah.
How does one do that?
It's a lifetime quest. That's all I can say. It's not something, some people find it right away. You know, it's like music. I mean, some people are just virtuosos at a very young age, but um, I think it depends on you. You have to find that place where it doesn't matter anymore, whatever. people say out there, you don't want a publisher who's going to say, you can't write that.
Hmm.
You don't want anybody to tell you what to do to publish. You don't want you own your voice. And I think to own your voice is the most precious gift, whether you're in music or painting or whatever it is that you do, because you must know that in this world we have to conform to this and to that, and we have to please certain people, and we have to. So it's very hard to find your voice. But for me, it came with solitude, a lot of solitude, a lot of silence, a lot of a very frugal life, where you don't scatter yourself all over. You don't,
Hmm.
and it's so easy now, it's so easy to be, because we are in such a fractured societies, fractured world, and with all the information that we get, from the media, and it's all, oh, it's incredibly destroying, to the creative process,
Hmm.
um, and spirituality for sure.
Yeah.
So I think it's all about finding that solitude and being very comfortable with yourself. It is not easy. It is not easy.
And maybe it also has something to do with what you're aiming for. Because I think when. Okay, so I'm gonna think out loud for a second. Tell me what you think about this.
Yep, yep.
Like you, I am also quite disagreeable. So I don't have a lot of issue with putting my opinion or my voice forward. And sure, there's risk attached to that, right? And you have to pick your battles. You should not be disagreeable all the time, or you should not, just make arguments just for the sake of making arguments. It has to serve a purpose. It needs to do something.
Hmm.
But when it is necessary, like you, I don't have that issue either. It was actually one of the things one of the questions I asked myself regarding starting this podcast. Like, okay, you're putting your voice out there, but it takes a lot of risk with it because you're publishing yourself, and not just 1 hour of material, but tens, hundreds, maybe thousands of hours material in the end. There's a clear risk attached to that, because if you make one mistake, or if you say something that when it's taken out of context, is very offensive, or stuff like that, there is a risk attached to that. And the risk is that your social circle will have opinions about it, that your employment will get into trouble, that the relationship that you have with certain people, your partner, or your children, or your parents, or whoever it might be, your friends, your neighbors, whoever it might be,
Hmm.
that can get into peril. So, but that said, I agree that it's a beautiful thing to find your voice and to bring forward that which you think is true.
Hmm.
Um, and that way, if people do that, and if you identify that people put their true selves forward, it is a beautiful thing. Whether or not you agree with the specifics of what is being said, that's up in the middle. That's up for discussion.
Right.
But still, that's generosity that people have to bring their honesty forward
Hmm.
in a pure way, in a genuine way.
Yep.
That is beautiful. But then going back to your story, you and I, we have the advantage of being a bit disagreeable, maybe. Um, and I can assume here that it also means that you are willing to take certain risks.
Yes.
Someone who is less disagreeable, so who is more agreeable, pretty much I'm re-asking the same question. How does one find their own voice, and how does one reach that point of being honest and genuine and really put themselves out there with the overhanging threat, of that impact on your social circle, in your work, and everything that I just mentioned. Those are very practical risks.
Hmm.
How can people overcome that when when the when the negative impact that it potentially will have on them is so large?
Hmm. Well, it's hard for me to answer that because I don't know. I was never agreeable.
Hmm.
So I only lived the life of a very disagreeable person. And you're not going to tell me what to do and no way, da, 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 you know?
Right.
And I also admired um, artists and poets that were that way and that have lived very lonely lives, but at the same time have cultivated within that lonely life that their art or their, their poetry, art, whatever it was. And I think if you are passionate about something, you move through your weaknesses or whatever stops you from doing it. Because I remember for me, the fight that I had was I did not want to be a poor poet.
Hmm.
I did not want to be in poverty. I just loved luxury and money and traveling and diamonds. I'm telling you. At some point, I just wanted like a diamond ring, but I was buying it for myself, It was like, but I never did. But so there are things that you have to put aside. It's a battle against yourself. You know what I mean? Well, it's shadow work. Have you read Jung? um, I think it depends. I've had quite a bit also of psychoanalysis and all that, and I worked with the what are they called? Jung has these characteristics, that you can have that are stronger in you than I forget. And when I was young, it was also Freud, and so I worked through these things as if they were my dark side, they were my shadow that I had to confront and that I had to look at and say, okay, are you going to have the best of me or what? You have
Hmm.
to do these things. You have to analyze yourself. You have to be very attentive to your own personality because it can reveal a lot of things that stop you from being or from doing, from creating, from finding that voice. So I guess that's what I would probably tell a young person. It's to really go through that. It reminds me of Dante and the Divine Comedy. I think we have to go through our own hell to find maybe who we to find our voice, but it doesn't have to be with the Christian faith or with it has to be honest, very, very honest in your quest to find your voice. Yeah.
Hmm.
But it's not easy. It really isn't.
No,
There's no silver bullet for that, none at all.
no.
And I think as humans, I think we all have the very same, um, we're all stuck into that. I don't think any of us are born with wisdom. If we want to find wisdom and a certain peace of mind and that voice, and I find that is so important.
Hmm.
Um, we have to do the work.
Yeah, yeah, you certainly do. And I especially like the question that you asked yourself. Is this the best version of me? So maybe
Mhm.
that makes a lot of sense. So in the case that you are agreeable and you have a hard time bringing yourself forward and a hard time sharing your ideas with the world and being honest with the people around you, maybe what you can do is indeed ask yourself the question, Is this the best I can be?
Mhm.
Is that repetition, that parroting, well, not really the parroting, but is the echoing, other people's words from my own mouth without any of my thought in those words. Is that the best I can do? And maybe the answer to that question is sufficiently terrifying that the alternative, which is being honest, becomes way more attractive. Because else, for the rest of your life, who are you going to be?
Yeah. And I think also there's a confusion that young people have. I say young people. I've worked with students a lot, and I seem to know a lot young people. Um, let's say you talk about disagreeableness. In some ways, disagreeableness is uh, easier to work with than agreeableness, because agreeableness has a very positive sound to it. You wouldn't think that it can be also very dark to be agreeable. And so it's harder, I think, because you have to, give these words their their darkness and their light. And so there's light in disagreeableness, and there's darkness in agreeableness, and
Right.
vice versa.
I'm very curious what you mean by that. So, in my mind, when you said that's too much agreeableness or very high agreeableness can have a dark side in it. The first thought that went into my mind was that one of the sub traits of agreeableness is compassion. So, in my mind, what you said sounded like too high of compassion can be dark.
Mhm.
And so the way that my mind then went was that, okay, that seems to be true, because if you take, for example, a mother
Mm,
who is too compassionate to the maximum,
mm, mhm.
she will protect her child whatever the cost, from everything, which inhibits the child from learning and from failing and from becoming more sturdy and more resilient to the world.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's
Mhm.
what they call the devouring mother. Uh,
Right. Yeah.
and it is very present in our societies right now.
Mhm.
And for me, I think that that devouring mother, um, and it's almost like the feminization of the world, but too much, too much.
Right.
I think we needed feminism and we needed change and so on, but I think we have gone way too far. And even putting this terrible thing on young people, making them responsible for global warming. It is your generation, and if you don't do anything, we're going to, the earth will disappear. And they talk about nature as a child that has to be saved. Again, I don't know. I feel that that devouring mother syndrome is everywhere right now. And but people are waking up, because we all know that being a mother is not negative. It's not dark, but it can be. You see, that's the wonderful, wonderful discoveries of psychoanalysis, of even mythology, of archetypes, of I don't know, Jordan Peterson. I didn't read a lot of his books, but I've heard him speak, and he has also the very same understanding that with Ian McGilchrist. Okay, it's easier to understand with him, because um, he has the two hemispheres of the brain. Okay, that can't live. They can't live one without the other. There's no way.
Mhm.
It's a constant, constant working together. All right. But one is more like how would you say, pragmatic, that's the left one. It's more like order, but it's also the side of anger and narcissism and all that.
Right.
And the other one is way more spiritual, understanding, can see the beauty and all that, but you can't have one without the other. And I think in with the machine, what he calls the machine, I think technology, um, AI, and also that we have pushed a lot of children to study sciences, mathematics, and you have to be good in computer skills and do. We forgot um, the other side, like the humanities, the arts, and all that. And I think we have a we have I'm not saying this as my thing. This is Ian McGilchrist saying, well, maybe he wouldn't think I'm saying exactly what he says, but that's the way I understand him. Okay. Um, and so these things are not easy, very, very complex, very complex. And I think in all of this, we need so much humility, just so much humility, and so much, so just to back away from all this trying to get it, trying to understand, and seeing that it is complex. It is. And I think the only way is to deal with yourself, to you becoming a better person, maybe, or the best you can be. I always want to come back to this finding your voice, because I think when you find your voice, you take responsibility for that voice. It's yours, and you're speaking what you understand.
Hmm.
And so I don't know. Am I going around in circles? it's uh, it's a little bit difficult to answer all these questions because I don't think anybody knows the answers.
Hmm.
I think we're all quite because some people will blame. Let's say we were talking about postmodernism, okay? Somebody will demonize somebody like Michel Foucault. He was a horrible person, da da da. They want to, Others, it will be Derrida or somebody else. I don't know.
He's the one that brought forward the idea that everything is surrounding power, right? Foucault.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and not just him, but him too. But
Hmm.
I mean, the thing is that it's way more complex than just the one guy. Okay, well, see,
Right. Yeah.
so if it was just the one guy and everybody believed him, uh, there's something wrong there. So it's these movements in civilization, okay? These movements, there's these understandings. I think it's all part of the human experience of trying to understand who we are, where we come from, what we're doing here, the values, what brings us together, what I don't know. I really don't know. Those are all questions that I can't answer for sure.
So there's something very interesting I heard actually today. And it was a podcast with Joe Rogan and Chris Williamson. Chris Williamson is also a podcaster.
Mhm.
He's the guy behind Modern Wisdom. And what he said is that we often think we know the answer without having asked the question. And that makes a lot of sense. Because, like you said, instead of asking each other questions and trying to figure out what's what and to learn from each other and to listen to each other to see what we can learn and how we can improve and how we can reconnect with what is true. What happens a lot, I think, is that we assume that we know the answer to the question that was not asked,
Mhm.
which means that there's these ideas right now that keep on being repeated. You mentioned a couple of examples, regarding the climate situation. That's one of them.
Mhm.
Um, there's a whole bunch of those kind of ideas, both on a political scale and on a socioeconomic scale, and on all kinds of different axes of the same graph, pretty much. And what you said, so you touched upon, I feel you touched upon what the antidote to that is, because you mentioned humility, you mentioned spirituality. And this also goes kind of into what you said at the very beginning, that you believe that poetry is like a spiritual quest.
Mhm.
It's this quest to learn and to create and to
Mhm.
express
Mhm.
and to be honest
Yep,
and to be real and genuine.
exactly.
Um, that seems to be, might not be the whole answer, but it seems to be a way to counterbalance it, back to thinking, back to collaborating with each other, back to working together and learning from each other.
I know, but don't you think that there's a danger in that too? I mean, I don't want to be pessimistic or anything, but
Mm-hmm.
there's something called idealism, I guess, ideologies and all that,
Yeah.
where someday we'll all be together and someday we will understand. And, as long, if only we could do this, we would be so happy. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that at all. I think that through the ages, there have been people like the mystics. I've read a lot of the mystics. Um, People who are in monasteries. Sorry, my English sometimes is it's a bit difficult. People who live away from the world and what they find in their little quiet lives. It may not be for everybody, but I think there's a bit of that in all of us. And it's never going to be perfect. It's never. I think the turmoil of wars and fights and politics and money, crime, all that. In my little humble opinion, it's always going to be there. But I think as individuals, we have sometimes the choice to maybe not go into that too much. Or if we have been in it, to come out of it and to maybe live differently. But I know Joe Rogan and I know Chris Williamson also. And I appreciate those guys. One, for his honesty. I think Joe Rogan is a very honest man. He's like authentic, whether you agree with him or not. Now that's a guy that has his voice, I think. and and um, and Chris, I think Chris is also doing a very good job with his guests and really trying to understand. But I don't know if there's any way to have everybody understand and be happy and get rid of um, all these wars that we have to fight within ourselves or with others. Or I don't know.
Right. One of the words that is being used today a lot is the word authenticity.
Hmm.
Be authentic.
Hmm. Hmm.
To you, when you hear that, what does it mean to be authentic? How do you get there? And how do you recognize authenticity, whatever that may be, in others?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. Uh, I think as finding your voice, it depends on your childhood. It depends on how you were brought up. I remember as a child not knowing at all who I was. I just had to obey. I just had to shut up. I just had to do. I wasn't allowed to speak, or if I did, it was silly or crazy. you try to show a bit of love, and it's just not there for you. Um, so a child who is born that way, and also there's another big issue about my childhood. I don't want to talk about me specifically because, but this will resonate with other people. Where you are born within a minority, a group, a minority of people who are a part of a minority, okay? And they were also victims of a certain type of genocide, where they were deported, exposed is the better word, where put on boats and get out of here. It's a long story, but just to give you and what they had to do, some of them, and those were my ancestors, was to hide, to run away, so they wouldn't be killed or they wouldn't be put on boats and thrown in the ocean. So these people lived along the coasts of eastern Canada and were quite fearful and quite isolated and very, very poor. And also, what that does to people is the I think the self-esteem. For lack of a better word, um, they consider themselves or they see themselves as victims, as So if you are from that type of a community and you are very impressed by the people who are stronger than you, where the language that you speak, my language, the French language that was spoken when I was a child, was not the right French. That's not the way we speak French. And we had the nuns in the convents, who would tell us, oh, da, 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 da. We had to speak, but when we did, I wrote a little story called "A Gun to My Head." When I was a child, you had a gun to your head because they wanted you to talk, but when you did, it was wrong. So that's the way I grew up. So I think that's it. Those are challenges that add to finding your voice. You see, because if you are formed being ashamed of who you are, being ashamed of the way you speak your language, which was French, being, mocked by a certain other people speaking French much better than you, uh, and then you're not very rich because you are from ancestors that had a lot of hardship, okay? It's very hard to find your voice then because you have to move through all of that. You have to move through history. When I was young, I remember I would feel being from that minority, I would feel the weight on me as if I had an iron coat. Like weighing on me like that. You have to carry that. Oh, your ancestors were this, da, da, da. So it depends. I think that some people will be able to find their voice way easier than others. But why do some of us have to go through so much, so much? And then you must know also that the way you are formed when you are a child, you continue that in your adult years until at some point you can actually see what you're doing and where you come from and all the reasons why things keep happening to you, like I don't know, abusive relationships, whatever you want to call it, people mocking you. You use that over and over and over until you realize. So for me, I can only say that it's been, well, quite a lifetime. I had to work through stuff
Right.
because I had a lot. I was carrying a lot.
Yeah.
But for some people, it's not that difficult, but they may have other challenges that I had, that are not as visible. but it's not to compare. It's just, yeah.
I think this also gives a pretty big insight into your personality and how you grew up. Because
Mhm.
so let me know if I got this right from the few things that I can stitch together here.
Mhm.
You mentioned that in your childhood you had the let's call it an urge to express yourself,
Mhm.
but
Absolutely.
um, you in some shape or form you were not allowed to. You called it the weight of a iron coat weighing on you. Um, and you also mentioned writing a story called "A Gun to My Head."
Mhm.
So can you because I'm very curious in how this shaped you as a person, because you mentioned a couple of things throughout this conversation. You are disagreeable, you are creative, you enjoy your solitude, and you like to create and to explore and to reconnect with spirituality through your poetry. But at the same time, you mentioned that you grew up in an environment that didn't really appreciate that, let's say. How did you deal with that? What did it do with you? And how did you deal with that? And how did you get out of that? It's a bunch of questions, but I hope it makes sense.
I think in all the darkness, okay, as a child, there was a lot of darkness, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was really my mother had like three daughters in a row, and then there was a space where she wasn't pregnant, and she said, "Oh, this is my boy," and it was me. So I was a total disappointment. Now, that in itself is not important, but she kept reminding me all the time,
Right.
how I was a little bit too many girls here. So I already felt rejected. I already felt not wanted. But I think if I put it with that, the fact that I was in a really big family, 9 children, there was mental illness in my family. There was, a lot of things, but there were such beautiful things. And I think that in every childhood, there's something magical that you keep in your head. Mine was, well, quite a few really, but my favorite one, my most important one was my mother. She played the piano. I may cry here. I'm sorry. uh, she played the piano and she sang songs for us. Now these songs were all in books, and some of the words were like from the French from France. Such beautiful words, and she would sing, and I was so to me, I could memorize all those words. I could sing all those songs.
Mm-hmm.
They just took a part, were so much a part of me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then what I would do is I would change some words, and I would make her laugh. We had a very sad mother. She was very dramatic, and to make her laugh was wow. It made me so happy that I could with my words. So you see that gift in there. You see, it's like those are things that even if you suffer as a child, even if everything is very dark, what a beautiful gift.
Yeah.
But then there were sides of my mother that were very dark. But you see, this side stayed, and I think also she, in some very meaningful way, is probably the one who gave me the love of all those words and the love of poetry. So you see, that's, I think, how people survive, because there's beauty in life, even if it is full of darkness, and even if that coat of steel was on me. For the coat of steel, I could tell you something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my mother, I was just a tiny little girl, and my mother had to go to the hospital. And so we were all placed in different families. So that, because she wasn't at home. So I was placed with my godmother and my godfather, and these were older people, and they had uh, grown up kids. So I was the only child in the house. Can you imagine? And I stayed with them, and that's something I never forgot after that. The care that I had. I was, I don't know, the woman, she would put a bit of perfume in my bathwater. I had never had that. She bought me a nice little pink nightgown. Oh man! And the bed that I was sleeping in had all the blanket had all these flowers. And then they all loved me. I would get up and I would see all these adults. I was just a kid looking down at me and being kind to me. And my godfather, he had put um, a little piggy bank on top of the fridge. And so every morning he would pick me up. He would give me a coin. I don't know if it was a nickel or a dime or what. He would pick me up, and I would have to put it in the piggy bank. And then he would, So imagine that, and being treated like a little princess. I don't know, being so loved. And then when my mother came back, I had my little nightgown and I had this little piggy bank, but I never saw those again ever.
Why not? What happened?
Because there was no way that one child could have something more than the others. I guess my mother got rid of them or gave them to. There was a hierarchy in our family too, so she probably gave it, but I never. And that's the way it was. We were not allowed to be happy. And that's another thing I could say that is very interesting as far as language is concerned, because French to me was not um, was a harsh language. Okay, first of all, we didn't know it well, we didn't speak it well, we were kind of ignorant and blah 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 blah. But I was about, I don't know, 8 maybe, or I forget, when we had the first television, and everything on TV was English. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, did I fall in love with that language. You know what? Because they said things like "I love you," and they said things like "you are the apple of my eyes," or you know what I mean? Like, I just had never heard these things said in French, because it was somber in our family. My mother was not well, and it was, and so I don't know. I fell in love with all those songs, and to dream the impossible dream. And, these are very, very old songs that I would hear. And then I fell in love with that language, and I just loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it. And now I write in English, and now my favorite poets are all in English. And so I don't know. I made a big switch there, but that's part of my you know my life, what I did, and the paths that I took. I don't know.
In what way has writing poetry helped you understand love, loss, and happiness?
I think love, lost, and happiness to me, uh, that's not important.
Okay.
I mean, if you mean romantic love or whatever, I don't think that's important at all. But there's a love that you can find that is, I don't know, in nature. It can be, it's within yourself, and something has to come and open your heart. Because I think that's the worst part of hardship. When you have a lot of hardship and maybe too much, your heart just closes right down, and you can't love,
You become bitter.
and you are
Hmm.
bitter, and you can be very angry. And I lived that way a long time.
Hmm.
But I think depression helped in a way where that bitterness is choking you, and then you can't keep, and I had a colleague at university, a friend, a very, very dear friend, and she has the gift of compassion. She really does. And at first, when she just gave me a hug, feeling my pain, I just wanted to just get off of me. But then in some ways, she really helped me to open my heart a bit to others. And then things changed in my life. I got closer to my children, to my granddaughter Jada, to, I don't know, the birds, the bees, trees, mountains. Where I live here, it's so
Life.
beautiful. It is so beautiful out here, so beautiful, so inspiring. It's But I think, as we have already said, there's a lot of work to do, to maybe try and find some ways to counter that, postmodern, or I don't know, woke, or whatever they want to call it, because it has been very devastating, for our culture, for our values, and for art. For art. My next book, which is not finished yet, but it is called When Art Hurts. So it hurts to do it, but it is also hurting. So, but there's work there's lots we can do, I think, and that's maybe a way to find meaning, because we need to find meaning in this world. It's not easy just to live without meaning. We have to find some kind of a purpose. What do you think?
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think especially the word meaning, reconnecting with meaning, reconnecting with traditional values, and reconnecting with life and with humanity, and struggle forwards.
Mhm.
Fail a lot, but struggle forwards and becoming better and helping each other do that.
Yep. Yep.
That seems to be the correct way forward to combat exactly what you laid out. Um, and you also said something very interesting. You said that at some point you were able, with the help of that other person, to open up your heart more and to connect better with everything.
Yeah.
With your children, with your community, with life, with
Yeah.
nature, with everything.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's good. That's beautiful.
There's something that really, when you are bitter, closed, and angry, and
Hmm.
just, mm, um, something happened also to kind of break me. It's really broke my heart so much that I had to reach out. One of I shouldn't talk about this, because, I may get a little bit, weepy, but it was so hard. I have two sons, and the youngest, was, diagnosed with schizophrenia. He had a huge, huge psychosis, and, so you have this young man in your life, your son, who, did his third year at university, was, you don't even know that he's sick, and then all of a sudden he is gone, and his body is there, but there's somebody in there that is not your son, completely changed. And that's hard. That's hard. And that was heartbreaking. That was so heartbreaking. And I think that in some ways it's been maybe the gift that I needed to open up and to crack that terrible shell that I had uh, around me. So, yeah, life is not easy, not easy. And I think that we need strong people. We need courage. We need strong words. I find that with my poetry now, that's what I like to do is to, like my last book is called Raw Sweets. It's like raw words. It's like, telling it as it is. And yeah, I don't know. It's, it's just different lives, huh? Different people have different
Hmm.
challenges and so on. And why do we have to go through this? I don't know, but we do.
I have a question for you, but if you feel that that question goes too far, or if you don't want to answer it for any
Mm,
reason whatsoever, please let me know. That's totally fine.
I will. I will.
That situation with your son, I think what you just said, if I understood you correctly, is that after that episode, when the psychosis happened, that's when you got triggered or engaged in opening your heart more.
Mhm.
Do you think that if you opened your heart earlier, that you could have prevented what happened?
Oh, I wouldn't know. I don't know. I don't know. Because could I have done something differently that maybe he wouldn't have had the psychosis? I wouldn't, I think I would have had to be knowledgeable about psychosis. I would have had to be almost like a psychiatrist to see the signs. But I wasn't. I didn't know.
Right.
It came as complete surprise. It's not as if I saw that, oh, this boy could have problems. I didn't see them. I didn't see them at all. I just thought, sometimes he was a little bit strange, but I thought, well, it's just, a fad or whatever. But young people also, and I know in his case, sometimes they take drugs and it could be influenced by that. It could come on by, we don't know. But the only thing I know, and if you don't mind, this is something that really, really happened to me when I realized on the phone he was calling me and he was saying that there was something growing in his chest here outside of his body and that he was being taken by aliens. Okay, so, well, your son is calling you and saying that. So that's when it triggered, poof,
Right.
And what happened to me at that time is that I actually fainted. I just I just fainted. And I remember being in a spiral, okay? And that spiral was so dark. And there were like horrible faces, dark faces everywhere, okay? But there was a light at the end, and I felt love. I can't bring it. Love, that word just doesn't, it, it doesn't really say what I want to say, but I felt that, you know. But all this tunnel of darkness and I realized that that was me. I had to clean up. I had to clean myself. I really did. I had been so bitter, so dark, so closed. And now this opening is also very slow. It doesn't happen,
Hmm.
overnight.
Hmm.
It takes time. You take risks, you try a little bit, and then you try crying because I had to cry, you know, when you haven't cried in years. But then I had to, I had to let myself just go. And yeah, it's just weird experiences, isn't it? It's just very weird. So that's why, in this life, what do we know? What do we know for sure?
Hmm.
It's like you meet these people who have the truth. They hold the truth. They know. And anybody that doesn't say what they believe is an idiot or is judged in some way. I don't know how they can do that. I have no clue. We just don't know. We don't know.
Yeah,
And we live with
it's that idea again, having the answer before the question has been asked.
mhm, yep, yeah, that's a very good one. Yeah.
I have one question for you regarding that experience that you had after you fainted, after you got that phone call from your son.
Hmm.
You said you landed in a spiral, in a downward spiral
Hmm.
that was dark and had these faces, and
Hmm.
it was a very dark experience. You said, but you said there was a light,
Yep.
there was a way out.
Yep.
What was that? What was that light for you?
I don't know. I really don't know. I've heard a lot of people who have what they call what do they call that? That they almost die and then they come back. um,
Hmm.
they always talk about that tunnel. I don't think the tunnel is that dark though. Um, I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure. Is it God? Like, do I believe in God? I don't know. I really don't know. I think there's something that seems to care and to come and give us signs or something. I'm not sure. That's very hard for me because I've been brought up Catholic, where I believed in God, and the very first thing I wanted in this world was to be a saint. I wanted to go to God. I wanted to die very, very young as a child. I wanted to die because I would go right away to heaven. Like, why wait? All that kind of stuff. And, but the God that I thought I knew as a child, and now this idea of a God watching over us or loving us, or I don't know. I have no clue. It's, and an episode like this, I could say that the light was God, that the light was love, or what? I don't know. I really don't know.
Hmm.
Somehow, I think um, when I speak to people who have faith and who really believe in God, I find them very lucky. Uh, I wish I could believe as easily, but it hasn't been my experience. Let's say it that way. I don't know. I really don't know. But I think maybe it could be explained because so many people have had these experiences.
Right.
Maybe it could be explained some other way. I don't know.
So this is another question that, if it's out of line, again, please let me know.
Hmm.
You said that when you encounter people that truly believe in God, that you consider them lucky.
Hmm.
What is stopping you from reaching that point?
I just don't. I wish I knew what was stopping me. It's like if you have a very analytical mind, okay, and you are used to reading a lot. I've read so many philosophers, so many um, I don't know, people like Ian McGilchrist and people like you read these people and they are full of questions. Um, but when I read mystics, or sometimes I feel a little spark of mysticism maybe in my poetry. I can't say that it's mine. I can't say that that's God. I don't know. But the people that I know that have very strong faith, they are good people usually. They are very good people. But they don't have that analytical mind, that curiosity to, oh, really? How do you know? Uh, and who told you that? Can you prove that? And is that, or really? You see, I think if you have that mind where you ask all the questions all the time, maybe maybe it's not possible to believe. I don't know.
That's a very interesting idea.
I think if I had like a very powerful spiritual experience, okay, that
Hmm.
God would actually prove that He exists, I would probably believe.
Right.
But it's hard when you are when you're always questioning and you have to go with the experiences of others. It's like, well, I mean, okay, so you had that, but so I don't know. And you ask yourself questions again. So because I read the mystics, okay, like Saint John of the Cross and Saint Teresa of Avila and all this.
Hmm.
You read them, they are absolutely in love with this with God. It's incredible. It's like if have you read Rumi? Oh, he is like passionately. And that too, I love it. I find it fascinating, but it's not me. It's not my experience. You see, you can't fake believing, I think. Although I think some philosopher Ted said, if you fake it enough, you will believe. I forget who that was. I think it was a French guy,
Yeah,
but
it's a different
yeah,
take
because
on
it would
the.
go, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Faites semblant de croire et bientôt vous croirez. So it's like
Yeah,
fake it and then you will have it. But I don't know if that could work.
that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think I'd rather die with a question mark. You know that?
Hmm.
Because I'm 76, I think about dying. In 4 years, I'll be 80, and I think about it. And I think there's a big dignity in dying with a question mark. I don't know. I really don't know. But you're open. You're open. That's what counts. It's to be open, not to say there's nothing. And blah, 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 blah. It's like you die with a question mark. Maybe that's the best way. I don't know.
This is a very interesting thing to think about. So the question, what's stopping you from believing wholeheartedly in God? I think the answer boils down to having an analytical mind and having that natural curiosity and keep asking questions. And it kind of makes sense um, because in the scientific community, so the scientific community, scientists are generally seen as the polar opposites to religious people
Mhm.
throughout history, I think. And there is overlap. So there is, of course, scientists who believe in God,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
100%. But the idea of having that natural curiosity and that tendency to ask questions, not just now, but like as part of your personality, it is your being to ask questions. That somehow inhibits you from believing because the idea of believing in God is kind of not asking yourself any question is I'm not really sure what the question will be, but it prevents you from asking the question if there's anything else, maybe something along those lines.
Hmm.
So would you say that somebody who is incredibly curious and keeps asking questions like this stereotypical eternal student, they never stop learning ever, doesn't matter how young or old they are.
Yeah,
Do you think those kind of people are the least likely, and you kind of already answered it, but are the least likely to believe in God, to be religious, to be spiritual, and to therefore maybe in extension practice poetry as this quest to reconnect with spirituality? Would it be a fair assessment?
possibly. Because I think for me, that's what poetry was. It's almost like a vehicle to move through spirituality, if you want to,
Right.
as I, it's like a part of the search. But I have found also that there are people, as we say today, that are on the autism spectrum,
Hmm.
um, that have well, I will say it this way, okay? I'm not a scientist, but that have very, very strong left hemisphere um, ways of seeing the world. There's no way that they can believe in God. There's no way. There's no room. Everything is so, these are minds of, I don't know, technology, computer programming, engineers. It's very difficult. They're very good people. They are very kind people. They have sometimes, very often, a lack of social skills. They can't decipher emotions, and they have very little emotions. Um, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they can, but I relate a little bit to those people. Not that I'm on any autism spectrum. That's not what I mean.
Hmm.
But I relate. I see where it is for an inquisitive mind. It is so impossible to believe. Maybe not impossible, but it is hard. It's not something. Maybe you should fake it. I don't know. I don't think so. I think as I said, living your life honestly, finding your voice, whatever, and dying with a big question mark. I think that's wonderful.
It's an adventure.
We don't know.
Hmm.
Yeah, you just don't know. I could never say I have found the truth. I could never say that.
Right. Yeah. I really wonder what it would take. I really wonder what the answer to that question is. What it would take for a person with your personality in this case, so a person who is very curious, this eternal student, not even just disagreeable. I don't think even in this specific context, the disagreeableness is relevant. It's more that curiosity, that yeah, to use your words, that inquisitive mind.
You just
What
never
does it
ever
take?
stop.
Yeah, what does it take for them to reach the point of wholeheartedly believing? I really wonder what the answer to that question is.
But the question I have for you, this one, is why? Why should they? Isn't it better to have all kinds of people? I think, is it absolutely necessary that they believe? I don't think so. I think there's a way to live a very, I don't know, very good life, a very
Yeah.
um, intelligent life, a very meaningful life. And don't you think also that fate cannot exist without doubt? So if you put it in on the scale of humanity,
Hmm.
some people need to believe, but some people need not to believe. You see what I'm saying? I think it's all part of a balancing. Um, I'm not sure. It's like the story of Cain and Abel in the Bible. Um, there are many ways of explaining that, and some people have interpreted it in many different ways. The way I see it is there are people who will write poetry, let's say, and God will love it right away. But then there's Cain who writes poetry, and God says, that's not it. And I think that's part of who we are in humanity. But you don't want Cain to kill Abel.
Hmm.
But at the same time, what if we were all Abels? And what if we were all Cains? It's, I think it's part of life. It's like good and evil can have to coexist. And I'm not saying Cain was evil, but probably if he killed, uh, you know, it's like it all has to be. So I think that people who are good people and who just cannot believe, um, it's okay. It's fine. I think the ones maybe that feel too much evil in their lives, though, or who commit evil and so on, maybe that's, I don't want to say this, but I'm saying it anyway. Maybe that's okay too. Maybe that's part of the, how can you have good if you don't have evil? How would you recognize evil? How would you, I don't know. That's all so many questions, so many questions.
Hmm.
And, all those philosophers who I've read so many of them, and they don't know. I mean, they explain certain things, but I think nobody really understands. I like Ian McGilchrist for that because he is a scientist. He has studied the brain and has written powerful books and has seen how we need the transfer of both hemispheres together, the work together.
Hmm.
But he doesn't have any answers. He doesn't say, oh, if you do this, you're going to be happy. Mm-mm. He said, listen, I've discovered this thing, that we have between our two ears, and I've seen how it works. And it's like, that's all I can say is what I saw and how sad it is right now because one part took over, sort of. Okay, so we have to kind of balance things out. But he doesn't give any answers or any. I think I don't know. Maybe we have to find answers for ourselves. Some people have to find answers for ourselves, and some people need faith. I think a lot of people that I know that have faith could probably not live without it. They need that. It's like a guidepost. It's like, they need that.
Right.
But for some, a guidepost is something to be chopped and to find your own. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not that easy. It's not that easy.
No, it is not. And this is one of those incredibly complex subjects that there is no single answer to. And like you said, everybody I think has to arrive to their own answer.
Yeah.
I think if I may think out loud for a little bit and tell me what you think about this. The question that you asked, why do you want to believe? Why should you?
Yeah.
I think so. I don't necessarily think that faith is this framework that will help people operate that if they didn't have it, would go on to live chaotic lives. So I don't think faith is just, and that's not what you said. So I'm making it extreme right now, but I don't think that extreme is true. What I think is that faith is a framework by itself for everybody, and that I think even though you're living a good life and even though you are a good person, whatever good may be within the specific context, and even though you're good for your community and you provide value and all those sorts of things, right? Everybody loves you, all those sorts of things. I think faith is, from technically speaking, a mechanism to put something at the highest that is not yourself
Mhm.
or your ideas. It is this belief that you don't have all the answers. You don't even have all the right questions.
Mhm.
But you believe that everything in our being and everything around us is there for a reason and is operating a certain way for a reason. And everything in the end will be okay. Whatever challenges right now we are facing, as the challenges that we, discussed over the course of our conversation, in the end it will be okay because there's a purpose to it. And there's something higher than us that has this under control. That made all of this happen for a reason. And I think if I zoom out and I look at that, um, yeah, I'm calling it a mechanism from a very technical standpoint, but I look at the way that hierarchy or that framework or whatever name you want to give it operates. I think that whether you don't have your life under control or you do have your life under control, that framework still provides the value of knowing that you don't have all the answers and that there is this eternal call for adventure, this asking questions,
Mhm.
talking to people, listening to people, asking the proper questions to people just to figure out what's what. It's this mechanism that is injecting humility into people, I think. Maybe that is the value. And it also goes towards meaning. It provides, I think, to a certain degree, and I can't really properly articulate why it provides meaning, but I think it provides meaning because you understand that because you are part of this system that has a purpose and you have your place in that system, which is your place in your community, that by doing the best thing that you possibly can do, you are serving that and that you are serving that whole system. Maybe that is the value. Maybe that is the answer to the question: why believe?
Mhm.
What do you think about that?
But maybe there's a danger in believing, um, because if you believe, um, I think faith, it's like anything else, it can become very complacent. Um, it's easy if you're born in a family that believes and you all believe and you all pray and everything is, but I think it has to be questioned all the time. It has to be evaluated. It has to be, you kind of have to shake it up, because it's part of honesty. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay to be, to have faith and to, I found also sadly that people who have faith, um, do not have a good way of seeing people who don't,
Right.
and are sometimes very judgmental. You know what I mean? And so there's something there that is complacent. There's something there that is a little bit too easy. I think for people like me, or for people who are striving to maybe find truth instead of faith, if truth exists, um, well, let's say that I'm pretty much on that side. It's a very difficult side. It's like a search, a search, a search, or you have to practice. You have to. Oh, I did. I went on fast. You know, when you fast for 12 days, I wanted to have the experience. Some people go on these high drugs, to have spiritual experiences. I've never done that. I tried a little bit of mushrooms sometimes. I really liked it, but not enough to. I think it's very artificial. It's not something to me that really. But for me, it's been reading all these poets. Not poets sometimes are not that bright. But some are, and philosophers are. Oh, they twist your brain. They bring you in all kinds of directions. They say yes, but what if? And I don't know. I'm drawn to that, and I think there's a need in this world for that. I think faith is okay, but it may be just. I'm not saying it's easy as I judge it. I don't judge it. I think that people that have faith are very lucky
Mhm.
because maybe life is easier. Maybe life is easier when you believe.
Maybe.
If you have something that happens that is tearing you apart, and you can just turn to God and say, "Oh man, that hurts. Why did you do that?" And you know that it's was the right thing to do, because people who have faith justify so many things because it was the will of God. And I've seen through the age, through my life, and through the ignorance of my parents' generation, how they would believe that something is the will of God, and no, 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 scientifically, I'm sorry, this can be cured, or this shouldn't have happened if you would have, you know what I mean? Like in medicine, in different ways too, in psychology. Can you imagine when I was young, something like homosexuality was like the devil. You have to put that in hell. You know what I mean? Like, faith is dangerous. It's dangerous, I think. Um, and the scriptures and the Bible and all that, well, maybe we need people to interpret them better. I know as a child, I knew the Bible as something awfully scary. and and most of the stories, we didn't understand them at all. We were just told to, that we were, the nuns would tell us that we were hanging over hell by a hair.
Hmm.
Can you imagine when you're a kid? I mean, so I don't know. Maybe that's what threw me off from faith. But I think it can be dangerous. I'm just saying that I know very, very good, amazing people who have faith and who pray, and who I even ask some of them sometimes to pray for me. I do, because I think when people think about you in very positive ways, I think it helps. It really does. I think it really does. And so, but there are dangers. I find.
Do you think that poetry finds the poet, or that the poetry has to, or that the poet has to look for the poetry?
Yeah.
Do the stories find you, or do you find the stories?
Why does a child grow up with such a love for words? I mean, I don't know. I really don't know where it comes from. Like I know a young man who started playing piano at 3 years old. Where does that come from? I don't know. Now, did poetry find me or did I find poetry? I think both are true. I think I was drawn to it at a very, very young age, but then I had to find it because poetry, like anything else, has a very, very um, deep, how would I say, essence. You know, when you find the essence of poetry, and for me, it was a lifelong journey. So I think there's a bit of both. There's a bit of both. Yeah, it's like you're given a little gift of the love of words, and depending on how your life goes, because a lot of people will write poetry when they're young and just stop, or play music for a little bit and just stop, you know. But I guess some of us, we just can't stop. We just can't stop. It's just part of that drive. I don't know what it is. It feels to me like some kind of a life force that is inside of you that really won't let go. So I don't know. I can't answer that question. I think it's both.
This i- this your answer interests me for one reason. Well, for multiple reasons, but one specific thing comes forward, and that is this idea that over the course of our lives, we may engage in all sorts of different things. We may do all sorts of different things, whether we want to try it or whether we have to, because our parents, for example, tell us that we should go on a piano lesson, for example, or whatever it may be.
Hmm.
But there's this, you can call it a spirit, but you could also call it a drive or a vision or a natural interest. You could give it all sorts of different names, but there is something in us, like you said, that makes us interested or drives us even to do certain things. And I think everybody can relate to that. Everybody, if you ask a random person on the street, what do you really love to do?
Hmm.
Right? What really makes you happy? Like on a very deep level. Everybody has a different answer somehow. Because they're born with these different spirits or natural interests or, all these other words that we just used.
Yeah.
For you that was poetry. For you it was
Hmm.
words, it was language.
Yeah.
You had a very deep love for them.
Hmm.
I'm still going to ask you the question, even though it was already laid out to some degree that you're born with it. But I'm still going to ask you because I'm curious what you'll say.
Hmm.
Why did you think? What do you think is the reason that a drive that love that you have for words? What specifically is it about words and about language that you love so deeply, that you care so much about?
Oh, it's like the possibilities of words. Like I remember once studying music. It was a beautiful, wonderful prof because at the very beginning, what he told us is imagine the possibilities of notes. Like it's endless.
Mhm,
You see, when you have a note and then you have a half of a sound and then a quarter of a sound and then another one it's endless. The possibilities of sound, of music.
mhm,
And words, it's the same thing. It's like it's endless. And some words die and some others come to life. And I don't know. It's just so rich. If you go into um, like etymology and look at the roots of words and where they come from and the, the traveling that they've done and the different ways that they are interpreted in all kinds of ways, and that's pretty much how I write now. It's almost like collage, where you take you take I don't know, a river that suddenly stands up and and frightens the trees. And you know what I'm saying? It's like you have to go to all different possibilities with words. You have to almost break the. That's why I couldn't stick to versification, and all the endings that rhyme, and I just couldn't go there. And then to make sure that you have a metaphor and that you have a simile and that you have a da da da, oh man,
Right.
I couldn't. It's more like what you do is you take those words and you match them together where logically they would have no sense, but in a very poetic way. Whoa, it's strong for me, like I'm talking. So that has always fascinated me with words. It's what you can do with them. As I told you, as a very young child, that's how it started. I would take the words in the songs my mother would sing, and I changed the words, and that would make my father laugh. You see, I would put in a cat instead of a bird, let's say, and just little things, but that's how it started to just kind of twist,
Mhm.
twist in all directions and see um, the outcomes. The outcomes sometimes are magical.
Yeah.
It's just, and sometimes they're funny, and sometimes they're dark, and so yeah, I don't know why I love words so much. Some of them are really, really not nice at all. Um, words can make you say horrible things. They can destroy you. They can also love you, but they are amazing. And I think just when I got um, that moment of I don't know, it's like an aha moment when this professor of music really told us all the possibilities of notes. It's endless.
Mhm.
And I think it's the same thing for words.
Yeah.
I think you can, yeah, so it's a fascination. I don't know where it comes from. Don't ask me.
Well, you could make the argument that words are what allow us to tell stories,
Yep.
and stories have no end.
Mhm, mhm,
Stories keep on going.
mhm.
What you and I are doing right now is we are sharing a story together
Yep.
that is unique and that is new and that has never been told before.
Mhm,
And that story, we are using our words to communicate with each other, to tell it.
mhm,
There is no end to it. It is not finite. It is infinite.
mhm.
And
Exactly.
the parallel that you drew to music is the exact same story.
Mhm,
It's really funny that you bring this up because a short while ago, this exact same thing came up with another guest that I spoke to, a wonderful music composer. Her name is Sophia Lassa. She actually composed the music for this podcast that will be introduced very soon. And by the moment this episode with you goes online, will have been introduced.
mhm,
And we discussed the exact same thing. Um, and I brought forward it was a very naive question from my side. I didn't ask that question in that conversation, but it was a question I had, well, I think a long time ago. One of the questions that I asked myself back then was, how can you still create something new with music when there's so much out there? when there's so
Mm-hmm.
much different there's an incredible amount of music out there. So
Mm-hmm.
how can you be original, and how can you be sure that you don't infringe upon somebody else's copyright, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But that is a very flawed question to ask. It's a very naive question to ask. Because just like stories, and like you said, just like with words,
Mm-hmm.
there is no end to it. There is an infinite amount of combinations possible with music and with words and with stories that we tell each other. Yeah.
Yep. And that's what I feel with my poetry now when I say I found my voice. It is my voice.
Mhm.
I'm not it is so fascinating. It surprises me too, just these endless possibilities. And so yeah, so that's fascinating.
So I have another interesting question for you. People often say that they can't describe how they feel, or if you ask them what they mean when they say something or when they experience something, they can't find the words to properly articulate what it is that they are experiencing. The question that I have for you goes further than simply vocabulary that people have. It goes further than that. Do you think that words and our language is able to fully encapsulate and fully capture that which is the human experience?
I don't think so. We try. Sure try. We sure try. And I do believe that some poets come close, very, very close.
Mm-hmm.
But I think words, listen, if you if you love uh, somebody, okay, and you say I love you, what are you saying? It's so mundane. You cannot capture the whole experience of being in love with those words. You see what I mean? And you can put all kinds of passionate words here and there. Will you ever be able to express what it is that you feel? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's a constant quest, maybe, of the poet and of the artist and probably the musician too. It is to express as much as possible for them, for each artist to try and capture that. But
Right.
I I don't up to now anyway. I mean there's a poet called Shelley. I mean a lot of people know Shelley. According to me, man, oh man, he comes close. Some people, but not all of the poems. I mean, lots of his poems are okay, whatever. It's well written, but but there are some, whoa, they just grab you. And some people find that in Blake. Some people find that in, I don't know, other poets, lots of other poets. There are some wonderful American poets too. Um, but it's like reading a poem of being next or in front of a mountain and actually being in front of the mountain. It's not the same.
Mhm.
So I don't think it's really possible to express as much as possible. No, as if it were real. But then if you are sensitive and you read a poem, you almost don't need the mountain because you know what he's talking about. It can bring back those experiences of being in front of a mountain, let's say,
Right.
poetry or writing. I mean, I love paintings. Do you know Bruegel? I just love him. Oh man. But it's like it's like I look at his paintings and whoa, I can see so many things in there. But that's what he does for me. He doesn't do it for everybody, but he does it for a lot of people. So I don't know. I don't know. I mean, from my point of view and for poetry, I don't think that words can actually express everything, but sometimes, sometimes it's close.
So maybe words are not designed to capture the objective reality of that which is the human experience. Words are an abstraction.
Yeah, yeah.
Words are a high level abstraction of our experience. So, like you said,
Mhm,
the word love can, you can break that down into a ton of different things. It might mean anything.
mhm,
And this is also where a good novel, for example, comes in, because a novel is just a bunch of words aligned in a very specific, organized in a very specific order, but together they form this story, and that story doesn't serve us objective human experience, but it serves us a subjective um, image, and a vision, a story, an experience that which we can still experience in our own way. So that example about that mountain that you
mhm.
we you and I, we both know what a mountain is. But if we read exactly the same story about a person going to a mountain and climbing to the top and overcoming the hardships during the climb to the peak, your vision of that is going to be different than my vision. But the essence of it, the adventure of going to the top of the mountain, that's the abstraction. That's both for you and for me. That is true.
Mhm.
But the way that we see it and the way that we hear it and the way that we experience that which is our human experience is different. So maybe words are not designed to serve you and me the exact same experience, that which is the human experience. Maybe the human experience is subjective and is open for interpretation, and words are like the gateway to reach that, to facilitate that image to come forward in each other.
Yeah. And I think that's why translation is so difficult because if you take a Russian novel and you translate it to English or French or whatever, you don't capture the essence of the Russian psyche, the Russian mind, the Russian culture, everything. I mean, you can read a Russian novel in English, of course, everybody can, and still get a lot out of it. But there's always some pieces missing, I guess. That's the way I see it. It's hard for me with fiction. Um, I don't like fiction. Um, Most of the time, I did belong to a book club at some point, and fiction, fiction, fiction. I don't know. It's like you have to enter in the mind of this author who is going to take you on a ride, on a story, and he's got these characters built, and then he makes the characters think, and then oh man, I just can't go there. I just can't go there. To me, it's I know there's life lessons in novels. There's beautiful descriptions. There's supposed to be a lot of psychology and sociology and whatever. You can understand the world better. But I don't know. It's something that I find definitely boring. It's not like philosophy or, nonfiction books where you actually search for meaning. You really want to understand what what these people are really thinking. But fiction, sometimes I get, well, I don't read fiction. I did read some for a book club, like I said, but it's not my cup of tea. Let's put it that way.
Fair enough.
What do you think? I think sometimes fiction too, they go on and 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 on just to let you know that here, like you take the brothers Karamazov, okay?
Hmm.
I mean, I see the point. I know, but I mean, it could have been said, you know, in 2 or 3 pages. And it's like, ooh. So I don't know. It's difficult for me. But
Hmm.
I know so many people who love fiction, but
Yeah, I think I will be one of them.
you do. Well,
Um,
there you go.
yeah, yeah. For me, good stories, um, whether it's from a book or from a video game or from a film or from a story that somebody tells. Um, I think fiction allows us to go on allows us to go on adventure in a very creative way,
Mhm.
um, where we where we maybe deal with things that never objectively happened, but that are still very interesting to explore and still very powerful in the stories. They tickle our imagination,
Mhm.
and I think humans have they have incredibly strong imaginations. It's absolutely insane to think about what people can come up with. Um, there's wonderful stories out there, and these stories are not just interesting for you know for their for the steps that they take and for the adventures in them, but they're also interesting for how they weave people together, for example, in the stories, or creatures together in the stories. They're interesting because it allows us to step outside of the boundaries of our existence,
Mhm.
right? Because let's say we love stories about dragons. I'm not particularly a big fan of dragons per se, but just as a extreme example, dragons don't exist, at least not for as far as I know. So re- having experiencing the story about dragons and what they how they rule the world, for example, and how everybody is praising the dragons and how that interaction comes together and how society in
Mhm.
that specific format operates and what problems may arise and what conflicts between different human communities and those sort of things. It allows us to step outside of the boundaries from our human existence. And I
Mhm.
think it's very interesting to explore in that way because I don't think there's a difference between reading a story or watching a film like The Lord of the Rings or something like that and imagining something yourself. I think they are very much aligned. And one is done by yourself and one is being interpreted. So that's, there's a difference in where it's coming from. But the end result is the same. Well, kind of the same. It's this experience of that which objectively may not be true, but is still, yeah, to some degree, I will say, enriching.
What if I told you,
Hmm.
the myth of the dragon and why the dragon was placed in fairy tales or adventure fiction?
Please, yeah.
No, no, no. Okay, so the dragon is really there as a danger to people, but also as a protection.
Hmm.
You see, like if the village or the town did not have a dragon, it would be easily captured. It would be easily, you see. So you have to live with danger because a certain danger will protect you. So let's say you know that now. You know that you've read the myth of the dragon and so on. Uh, you see, that's the way I approach things. I don't read stories. I want to see, oh, okay, why would they write a story about that? And try to go to, you know, what, as you say, tickles the imagination, um, but not with the story, but just with why would somebody put a dragon and what are dragons for? And you go and check it out, in the books of mythology and why the cyclope, and why have you read all the Homer and the Iliad and the Odyssey and all that? Oh man, I love those books. Oh, and Gilgamesh. Have you read Gilgamesh? Oh, you gotta read
I'm
Gilgamesh.
way too far behind on all of this.
This is,
So it's
is,
one of the
is,
things I'm pretty ashamed of at the moment. I should definitely catch up to it at some
don't be
point.
ashamed. You're young. You've got lots of time. It's it's wonderful stories. Mhm.
Wonderful. I think I have
That was a long talk, huh?
definitely, and I'm really enjoying it. I think.
Oh, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I really am, because I thought maybe a 76-year-old woman would be boring for you.
No, but I told you before a couple of weeks ago. It's not necessarily so. I don't come from a background with poetry, and for as far as I know, I've never written poetry. Although I did write both professionally and creatively, even at this
Mhm.
very moment. Not creatively, but I do
Good.
write professionally.
Yep.
Um, so poetry is not something that I'm fluent in. I can't properly um, talk just about poetry. There's not much I can say about poetry itself.
Hmm.
But what I can talk about is about the human experience with you. And I think the the questions that are coming forward, like, okay, where did you come from, and why is language so important to you? What has it done for you in your life? How did you grow up with it? What kind of insights has it provided you later on in your life? That's the human experience, right? I'm very interested in the human experience. Um, and poetry, in your specific case, is a fundamental part of that story.
It is.
And that makes it super interesting because it's not what you and I are having right now is not a conversation about poetry. It's a conversation about the human experience, your human experience, and how you dealt with the different challenges and with the different stages of your life, and what you have done along the way to make sure that you reconnect with your spirituality, and that you go on a quest, and that you opened up your heart, like you said earlier, that has allowed you to reconnect with people around you better. That is a beautiful story. That is a story very much worth telling. And I think you've really told that story very beautifully today.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I hope so. It's always difficult because now I've developed a big sense of humor, and I always don't want to take myself seriously. and and sometimes it's crazy. Can I tell you just one little story?
Yeah,
It's
of course.
I went for a walk. I went for a walk yesterday, and I met an old guy. He was walking with a cane, and there were a lot of clouds, so I had taken my umbrella with me just in case it would rain. And he saw me with an umbrella, and he said, I didn't bring one. I live dangerously." I don't know if you I don't know if you can see the humor and the self derision, in this old man. It was just it hit me so funny. You have this old guy walking with a cane, and he didn't bring an umbrella because he lives dangerously. Oh man.
Hmm.
I don't know. Old age does that to you. You become a little bit you appreciate little things, just little things, just little moments. I had never seen him before. I probably will never see him again, but he gave me a good laugh.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. It's that human
So,
experience.
yeah, yeah, and to have a sense of humor. I think what humor does is that it balances us in all this, the darkness and the heaviness. If you have a bit of humor, And that was a gift that I had. I remember as a young child, being punished, but not fairly. Like I hadn't done it, but I was punished for it. And you know how you feel. You feel betrayed. There's something so hard. And you cry and you cry. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror crying and starting to laugh because it it's just that you see I had that gift. That was something I had. It was a possibility to pick yourself out of the darkness. Of course, it didn't always work because I had many years in depression. Whoa. But it's something that we must always remember to have a good sense of humor.
Thank you so much for telling your story. Just like you, I'm also very grateful that you want to tell it here on the podcast. There's a lot of beauty and very deep wisdom in your words and in your story. And I
I
think
hope so.
I think so. I think so. I'm probably gonna need a little bit to process all of it. Um, and there will be more than enough opportunity for that.
Mhm.
But I am really happy to have heard it. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. And I'm going to wish you all the best for your podcast in the future. I hope you do well. And because I know right now you're going through some changes or some, I saw one of your little clips or something that you are adding new things. So I hope it goes all well for you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Take care of yourself and all the best.
You too. You also. Thank you.
Thank you.